Overgiving breeds entitlement. Today I was reading a part of the Bible and I was reading the Proverbs and I was just going through it and I stumbled across this verse, and at first when I read it, it didn't really make sense to me, and so I searched it up to get further context. But this is the verse. It's Proverbs 29 verses 21, and it says, "He who pampers his slave from childhood will find him a son in the end." And I was just like, how is that a proverb? Like, I don't really understand. Like, the way that I read that is, he who pampers and shows love and admiration to his slave will end up being super close to him and see him as a son. Like, I read it like that. But when I searched up the meaning behind this verse, it talks about how if you give too much to your slave from the very beginning, and if you make them forget their position in your life, they will end up growing up with so much entitlement or feeling like they are entitled to a certain inheritance. And by that time, because of all of the pampering you've given them, they're more like a son than they are a slave. Now, in this context, in biblical days, it wasn't slavery that happened to black people. Usually slaves were people or children or descendants of people who owed a debt to somebody and couldn't pay it off with money or with cattle. And so these people had to work off their debt. And so when it says pamper a slave from childhood, this can simply just be a child whose father or whose mother died before they were able to pay off their debt, or who were just born into poverty, and so they work as slaves in order to pay off their debt, to get food in their mouth, whatever the case may be. So that's just some context. And I don't think this verse is trying to say that we can't treat people with respect. We can't see somebody like a son even though they're not our child. The verse is talking about overgiving and how that breeds entitlement. When somebody was a slave back in biblical days, their job was to do whatever their master commanded them to do and then go home for the day. But when we overanalyze, or when we overgive, or when we put somebody in a position higher than what they're supposed to be, we tend to forget what they started off as. And that's why it's so important to categorize people. A lot of people don't like this way of doing things because they want, a friend for everything or someone to do everything with. But the truth is, the older you get, you're going to have to learn to categorize your relationships. And that also includes, your friendships. And so maybe you have a friend who you can do absolutely everything with, but then on the other hand, you have a friend who you can only really study with, or you can only really do school-related things with, and you could never bring this school friend to your house, or you can never bring this school friend to an important event to you because this person is not right for that specific category in your life. And if you allow this person into that part of your life, or let this person know certain information about your life, it might end up hindering you in the long run. So this is the exact same thing. The master let the slave get too close to him in childhood and pampered the slave too much, to the point where the slave no longer recognized their position in the master's life. Their position was never to be a son or an heir to whatever the master had. Their position was to actually pay back debt to the master so that they can gain more of an inheritance. And when we're close to people, and when people are good people, you tend to move their position in your life, and that's okay, but I think it gets to a point where you have to know your limits. This master didn't know their limits, so they just kept on pampering the slave. What does pampering look like in this particular situation? Maybe telling the slave, okay, don't do this, just only do this, and I'll get someone else to do it, or you can come eat at the table with us, right? And in our minds, that seems like a good thing, that seems like a kind thing to do, and it is a kind thing to do. But what we forget is that in somebody's mind, that's registering to them that they're in a higher position than they actually are. There's a Bible verse that says, "Humble yourself so that you will be exalted. Don't exalt yourself, or else you will be humbled and embarrassed in front of everybody." And every single time I think of that verse, I think of being at an event, right? And there's a bunch of tables everywhere. There's tables at the front, there's tables at the back. And when you exalt yourself, you walk all the way to the front and sit at a table in the front, right? You don't know that there's assigned seats. And so then the owner or the person who's hosting the event says, "You over there in the front of the table, go to the back." And that's you being humbled because you exalted yourself, before anybody else could exalt you. But then when you humble yourself, you sit originally at the table in the back because you don't know your position at this event. You don't know where you're supposed to stay, so you humble yourself and stay at the back because, there's nothing much they can say other than go to the back. back. And when you humble yourself, maybe you know the owner of the event, they say, hey, like I actually want you to come sit in the middle, or I actually want you to come sit up at the front with me, and then you're exalted. But when you're pampering somebody constantly, you make them think that their position in your life is higher than it actually is. And the more that you give, the more they feel like you're entitled to give them what you have. This can start off as something super simple, like lending a friend money and telling them that they don't have to pay you back, right? And that's just a kind gesture. And they ask you again and you keep lending them money and telling them you don't have to pay them back. Then let's say you want to all of a sudden set a boundary and be like, I don't feel comfortable anymore giving you money. I've given you hundreds, thousands of dollars and I haven't got paid back once for it because I told you I didn't need it, but now I feel like you're taking advantage, so I'm just going to stop. I'm going to pull my hand away. And so let's say that person comes back to you and says, can I get $100? And you say, actually, sorry, no, like you can't get that this time. And that person blows up on you. Why did they blow up on you? Partially because they're entitled, but I would actually like to look at this from a standpoint of we have to correct ourselves and show people how to treat us. So if you're constantly enabling somebody and if you're constantly showing somebody that it's okay to use you, that it's okay to continuously take from you, if you're not setting boundaries, if you're not telling people no from the beginning, then you can't necessarily be mad when somebody is entitled or comes to you thinking that they deserve what you have when you've never set a boundary. So if you say yes 10 times and then say no the 11th, the person feels entitled to whatever you're saying no to because they've gotten it so many times. Like if you had a problem with it, why didn't you say that at the beginning, right? That's how takers think. But if you say yes one time and then you say no and then you say I'll think about it the next time, that person doesn't have that much of a sense of entitlement because your pattern is irregular. You're not a regular enabler, so they don't know if they may get it from you. And so when you say yes and then you say no and then you stand firm and then you let loose a little bit, it lets the person know that you're in control of your decisions. You're in control of what you give, right? And controlled giving is super, super important. I know the Bible says that we should be cheerful givers, but it doesn't say that we should be cheerful givers to the point where we're giving everything away and not being wise. The Bible says wisdom is supreme. Above all else, get wisdom. And so we have to be very cognizant of what we're doing and who we're giving things to so that we're not attracting the wrong people in our lives. The amount of times I've been like, I don't know why I keep attracting bad people. I don't know why I keep attracting takers. And then I look at my life and I look at my past situations and my past relationships, and all I'm doing is constantly giving. Why do you wonder that you're attracting takers? Well, because that's all you ever do. You always give. And takers know how to spot out givers and how to use them, right? So givers have to also know their limits. And you also have to learn to let go when God tells you to. So if there's somebody in your life and you've been enabling them for a little bit, but you don't think they're a big problem, you have to learn to let go if God's telling you to. I remember once I was friends with this girl and she was just so negative, right? And I was trying so hard to help her get out of that funk and get out of that mindset. And I would always help her out with little things even when I didn't have it, right? And I thought I was being a steward of Christ. I thought I was being a good person. And to a certain extent I was. And then God kept pushing me to leave this friendship. He said, what I'm giving you next, you can't have people like her around you. You can't have people like her watching what I'm about to do in your life, right? Because you will have more than enough, right? And if you have more than enough, then that means you can also give from a place of overflow. And though she needs things, I can provide for her in a different way. I don't want you to be the one to give her provision through me, right? And so I was wondering, like, why can't I be the one, right? If you're going to bless me so much, why can't I be the one that pours into her life? And it's because the overgiving that I had was starting to breathe entitlement. It was starting to make her feel like she was entitled to my resources, entitled to my money, entitled to my time, entitled to my presence. Like every single time that I wasn't doing exactly what she wanted me to do or being exactly who she wanted me to be, she got offended. And that was because she had a sense of entitlement towards me and who I was. And so it's very, very, very important to set that boundary when you start to notice entitlement coming up. What does entitlement look like? It looks like people getting surprised or getting offended when you say no. It looks like people getting surprised or getting offended when you start to finally speak up for yourself, or when you for once state what you want instead of letting them state what they want. And entitlement can show up in very subtle ways, like people believing they deserve what you have, or people wanting to pick something that's yours over you, or people, asking you for more even though you're already giving them more than they originally asked. That's what entitlement looks like, right? And it's just them pushing that button to see how far they can possibly be able to go and how much they can get from you. And so it's so important to know that entitlement comes out of overgiving, right? So it's, yes, this person feels entitled, but you're enabling it. And you have to learn that that's a faulty character trait, being an enabler. And you have to learn when to say no, because the more you enable people, the more they will do something. Some people have genuinely never heard no a day in their lives, but if you have to be the first one to tell them, that's what you have to do in order to make sure that your giving, or rather overgiving, isn't breathing entitlement